What's up, guys, and welcome back to episode number 4 of the Underdog podcast with myself, Pat Walsh, and my co-host over here, Aiden Coppell. Today, we're going to be breaking down the AFC South. Um, so, without further ado, the 1-15 Jacksonville Jaguars. Not too much to say about this team except they had a horrible season, complete garbage. 0-8 on the road, 1-7 at home. Lost the last 15 games. I'd say the only positives really to come out of this was James Robinson, who rushed for over 1,000 yards, 7 rushing touchdowns, so a great season for him. And that definitely a positive for this team, a team that wasn't really able to pass the ball all that well. And just didn't have. I mean, Minshew was supposed to be their starting quarterback, then got injured, then got pulled. Then they started Mike Glennon, and then they found out that the Jets realized how to win a game. So now they're going to probably have Trevor Lawrence in this upcoming draft. And I think that's going to be huge for this team. This is a team that, although they were 1-15, really struggled putting points up. I mean, they get Trevor Lawrence, they get someone that can throw the ball. These receivers are dangerous, and I know I sound kind of crazy saying that, but DJ Chark, Keelan Cole, Laviska Shenault, who they picked up in the first round, 20th overall, and then you got Chris Conley and Eifert, kind of the veteran presence there that are just there, making their plays when they can. Backup tight end James O'Shaughnessy, he's been getting some reps, almost 30 receptions for him this season. He's been a good blocking tight end. But if you look at these receptions from these top 3 receivers, Chark, Cole, and Shenault, Chenault's a rookie, and he had the most out of all of them at 58, exactly 600 yards, and he had 5 touchdowns. Keelan Cole and Chark also had 5 touchdowns. Chark had 53 receptions, Cole 55. So it was nice to see this team, spread the ball around on offense, and I think that's going to be huge. I think the coaching staff did great. The offensive coordinator did a really good job. Having James Robinson stepping in, giving him opportunities to rush the ball as a rookie. And then, all they really need on this offense, I think, is maybe a better offensive line, make some upgrades there, and then a quarterback that just knows what they're doing. And Trevor Lawrence, if you know anything about him, he knows exactly what he's doing. He's declaring for the 2021 draft. And he's probably going to be the next Jacksonville Jaguar. This season, this team only 12 interceptions, I believe, on the season. 3 of those Joe Schobert had. So he also had 141 tackles, led the team. So good season for him on the defensive side of the ball. But that's only, personal stats. And if you look at this defense as a whole, as a team, you lost 15 games. And I mean, probably all 15 because of your defense. This offense, some of the games they gave this team a chance to win. I mean, they battled back in the final couple of minutes of the fourth quarter, and now this isn't the greatest offense in the NFL, clearly. But this team definitely, this offense has improved. I just gave you all the stats of all their offensive guys. They're having bigger seasons. Something I'd like to see this team improve on is the rush game. Although, I'm praising Robinson here, saying he had a great season, which he did. Nothing against him. 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns, like we already went over. This team really has no other backup running back. I know, Chris Thompson was injured for however many games this season. They brought him over hoping that, he'd be healthy and catching a lot of passes out of the backfield, and hopefully next season he'll be able to do that. But and then this guy, Dare Agabawali, they're just not giving him enough attempts. I mean, only 30 attempts on the ground. I know he's a backup running back, but we talk about these teams like the Colts with, Hines, Jonathan Taylor, Marlon Mack, the Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt duo. I mean, even Latavius Murray and Alvin Kamara. I mean, Murray, clearly the backup on that team, but that's just because Alvin Kamara, he's doing his thing. Everyone knows that, especially the Minnesota Vikings. That 6 touchdown game. How are you? But Latavius Murray, he's getting his reps in. I mean, Henderson and Akers out in LA. even in Buffalo, where they don't have too much of a run game, you've got Moss and Singletary. So all these teams, they're kind of figuring it out, getting a duo of running backs and guys that they trust. And right now, I don't see that with Jacksonville. Um, Bawali, second season. I'd like to see them, using him more, at least draft someone in this upcoming draft that can do something for this team. But really, there's a lot of holes on this team, and this is going to be a huge draft for them. I think you go out and, you go and get your quarterback, your franchise guy, and then you just got to go up and down the list on defense because there's a lot of holes there, especially in the secondary. I think, their linebacking core isn't too bad if you're looking at their defense, but compared to other teams, this defense, ranked 31 in the NFL out of 32, right ahead of Detroit Lions, who we haven't talked about yet. We'll get to the NFC another day. But wow, this team needs a lot of work. But for my MVP of this team, I am going to go with James Robinson. I mean, he's a rookie. He's on a Jacksonville Jaguars team that's absolutely atrocious. Over 1,000 rush yards and 7 touchdowns. That's impressive. He also had 3 reception touchdowns. So, great year for him. Great rookie season. He's making an impact on this team. And this team, for what it's worth, probably would have been 0-16 without him. I mean, maybe. I mean, I know their first win was in week 1, but this team would have been a whole lot worse if they didn't have number 30 in their backfield. So, Coppell, now you can take over here with Jacksonville. Let's hear your point of view on this team.
Yeah, so how you doing, guys? But yeah, great points by Pat. Good. I like what you said about the offensive and defensive side of the ball. We now know that Doug Marrone's out as head coach. As 1-15 team, you really don't deserve a job. But there's speculation coming around that Urban Meyer, the old Ohio State head coach, is going to be the head coach maybe. And I love that decision if they do it. I think Urban Meyer is a football mastermind. And I think if you pair him up with, you're the number 1 overall pick, like Pat said, you really can't pass on Trevor Lawrence, and you really have just nobody's at quarterback. You gotta draft Trevor Lawrence, get that quarterback, get that offense solidified, and now you get Urban Meyer with it. I think that's a great duo that you can bring. Those two can build up the Jacksonville Jaguars scheme and the system that they want to build around. So I think that's a fantastic idea if they decide to do that. On the other side of things, this offense this year was just really not that good, in my opinion. I mean, they had weapons and they just couldn't do anything with them because of the quarterback situation. They had Minshew, they flipped to Glennon. They just kept going. Like I say, when you go through different quarterbacks in the season, it's just so hard to stay consistent because different quarterbacks play in different ways, and it's really hard to stay consistent. So that was a big issue. James Robinson, they lose Fournette to Tampa Bay. And James Robinson, undrafted rookie, comes in and makes an impact. Like Pat said, over 1,000 yards rushing, phenomenal season for him. 7 rushing touchdowns, 3 receiving touchdowns, fantastic stuff by him. And this offense, like you said, at number 20 overall in the draft, they draft Laviska Shenault. And out of Colorado, he was a good receiver, and I'm surprised that they were able to pick him up at 20. I think he's a really underrated player. And like we said, DJ Chark, if they get a guy like Trevor Lawrence or an actual quarterback, he's going to be used. He's going to be a threat. Same thing with Laviska Shenault. He's a deep threat. He's fast. He's speedy. He's good in open space. You look at guys like Chris Conlon, like you said, veteran presence, and then you get Keelan Cole. You know what I mean? So just receivers that you will be able to use if you have an actual quarterback. And we know that Trevor Lawrence is one of the best college prospects we've ever seen. So I think when you take that into perspective, you have a good chance if you draft this Trevor Lawrence kid. And not only that, if you can hire a coach like Urban Meyer. So I like that. Defensive side of the ball was just completely terrible. So let me just give you an offensive stat, by the way, while I'm here. The Jaguars were in the bottom 3 of the league in rushing yards with 91 or 94.9. They averaged 94.9 rushing yards per game on the ground. And like Pat said, there's no running back depth there. Behind James Robinson, you have absolutely nothing. Chris Thompson was hurt, and you can't just rely. The only team, like I'm going to be talking about later in this video, is Derrick Henry. I mean, like he's like the only guy that you can really say that can run the ball without having like a backup that can kind of fill in the void for you. So you need running back depth in this league, and this team doesn't have it. So they got to figure that out. But James Robinson, fantastic season, like I said before. So that's that stat. Defensively, like Pat, he stated this. Joe Schobert, I think he's been the centerpiece of the defense. led his team in tackles, but was fourth in the league in tackles with 141 tackles on that defensive side of the ball. So a great linebacker that you get for this defense. And I think that this Jacksonville team has always been kind of built around a defense. So you got a guy like that. You got to keep him for the future to just play well in that defense. You draft CJ Henderson, I believe, 9th overall in the draft last year, a lockdown corner out of Florida. I'd like to see him have a better season, but he's a rookie. And with a new system, who knows what he can do. So I love him a lot. Gators defensive backs become fantastic players. So I'm excited to see him. I think he'll be a future lockdown corner in the league. And, not other than that, Miles Jack on the defensive side of the ball, linebacker, not much to really say about this defense. I think that's a spot that you really have to target in the draft. We'll be making a draft video, so watch for that. And, let me just give you some defensive stats for Jacksonville because this is just sad. I gave you rushing yards, but on the defensive side of the ball, I mean, this team was bottom 3, probably the worst team, I think, in the league, definitely the worst in the AFC. But when it came to defensive yards per game, they gave up 417.7 yards per game. So when you're giving up that many yards per game defensively, I mean, you just can't even expect any offense to even make up for that. So, I mean, when you have a defense that is this bad, I mean, what do you expect? You can't really do much. Now, coming to sacks, we already talked about how Cincinnati in yesterday's video only had 17 sacks as a team. Well, this team wasn't much better. Only 18 sacks as a team. So bottom 3 in the league once again. What does that tell you? Your defense needs to get pressure. You need to get edge rushers. You need to get blitz packages that will actually work on these teams that you're playing. So terrible job by the Jacksonville's defense and Doug Marrone, the head coach that used to be the coach of just getting pressure and playing defense. Not really good at all. So that being said, if I'm a Jaguars fan, I don't know how I take it. I take it as kind of like a win-loss season because, in my opinion, you're 1-15. I mean, you're god awful. You're the worst team in the league, but you get the number 1 overall pick for probably one of the best quarterbacks we'll ever see in college, and he could be a stud, superstar quarterback in the NFL. So that's good. And basically, I'd give it a win-loss. You get a high draft pick from the season, and you discover James Robinson. But other than that, not much to be happy about. And my MVP, in my opinion, is between two. It'd be between James Robinson and then Joe Schobert on the defense. But I have to give it to, like Pat said, James Robinson, because when you're giving up 417.7 yards per game on the defensive side of the ball, there's just no way I can even hand you a most valuable player on the defensive side of the ball. So James Robinson, they take Fournette away. He leaves Jacksonville. This undrafted rookie comes in, like we said, and just absolutely kills it. I think without this team, they wouldn't even be in those close games like Pat talked about. They had a lot of close games that people don't realize. So without him, they wouldn't even be in close games. They might be even worse statistically. So I think it's a pretty easy decision. I think James Robinson, easy MVP for me.
Okay, so next team we have here in the AFC South, they finished 4-12. If you ask J.J. Watt, horrible. They should have been 12-4 as far as he's concerned. But the Texans, they finished 4-12, horrible season for them. 2-6 at home, 2-6 on the road. They lost the last 5 games of the season, and they barely squeaked out a win a couple of times, especially that game against the Patriots. That was a killer for us Pats fans. So Copel, take us away with J.J. Watt, Deshaun Watson, and the rest of the Houston Texans.
Yeah, so Houston Texans, obviously not the season they wanted, 4-12. In my opinion, this team should have been a playoff team. I mean, you give well, to be honest, let me just start off with this. This DeAndre Hopkins trade that they made at the beginning of the year, like before the season started, was just ridiculous. I mean, they didn't even get a first-round pick for this guy. Bill O'Brien completely destroyed this team, completely ruined it. I don't care what anyone says. He is the prime and main reason this team is the way it is. He completely ruined it. He's wasting Deshaun Watson's talent. I mean, listen, when you trade a top receiver in the league away for barely anything, I mean, what are you doing? Okay, you don't even have one now. You trade your first round pick to Miami. You get Laramie Tunsil for the offensive line a couple years ago, but he's all right. He's pretty good, but still, you don't even get a draft pick to even compensate for your season. So you bring in David Johnson at running back. I mean, people said like this guy's been injured, like he's not going to play good. And he started off the season strong, but then, he got hurt, didn't play as good. You have Duke Johnson behind him, so you have a decent backup, but he's not a starter, guys. Don't. I'm sorry, Duke Johnson is not a starter. He should not have been a starter. But what could they do? I mean, David Johnson didn't play a couple games. So I think the Hopkins for David Johnson trade was just ridiculous. I mean, you can just see how lopsided the trade was, and that completely ruined this team. Now, keep in mind, Deshaun Watson still had options. Like they bring in a speedy Brandon Cooks. That's a great deep threat. You get Will Fuller, who's actually a star receiver in my opinion, but he gets suspended for the end of the season. And you have like Kiki QT, who's a deep side there, but nothing special. So, but you still have Fuller and Cooks. You got these guys, and Deshaun Watson is a dual threat. He has a cannon of an arm. He's a great quarterback in my opinion. He can throw the ball where you need to throw it, and he can run the ball and he's fast. So I mean, he's a good quarterback. You give him those weapons, and you could see he would still do some stuff on the offense. Now the defense is a lot more disappointing. I think this is where the team really just wasn't good. So you fire Bill O'Brien, you bring the interim head coach becomes Romeo Crennel, who is a great coach in my opinion defensively. He helped Belichick coach the Giants when he was there, and he has to step in and be the head coach. So he wasn't expecting that. Bill O'Brien, see you later. You completely ruined this franchise. I don't know what you're doing. Another one of those Patriots old coaches that just goes to a new team and completely just can't do anything with it. But the defense here, it was terrible. JJ Watt, he's a really good defender. I'll give you another name. Zach Cunningham led the league in tackles. So the linebacker, he's really good. He's another bright spot on that team. He led the league with 164 tackles. So you got JJ Watt off the edge. You got Zach Cunningham at the linebacker position. I mean, that's good news. I mean, you have a guy that leads the league in tackles on your defense. That's a bright spot. But other than that, this defense was just not good at all. I mean, let me give you this. This team was third worst in the league when it came to point or turnover differentials. They were -9. So basically, their offense was turning the ball over, and their defense wasn't compensating for it. They didn't get turnovers. They were -9 in the turnover department. So compared to where their offense turned the ball over, so the turnover margin for this team is just completely negatively lopsided. So you got to figure out what you're going to do with that. Um, some more stats for this team. Let me see. Yeah, so they were in the bottom 3 in the league in defensive yards, and especially in the AFC. They were right behind the Jags, 416.8 yards a game that they're giving up defensively. I mean, guys, you have to realize this team, when you're giving up over 400 yards a game on the defensive side of the ball, there's no way you can win, regardless of what your quarterback can do. Unless you're like Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady in a crucial situation, you just really can't get out of the situation when your defense is giving up that many yards. It's impossible. So, I mean, the defense is the biggest weak spot on this team. They have talent on the offensive side of the ball, but I mean, come on, guys. And then another one, they're in the bottom 3 in the league for rushing yards per game with 91.6. I mean, they have an inconsistent backfield with Duke Johnson and David Johnson. Neither of those guys could really get it going consistently throughout the year. So I think you got to look at that and be like, there's no ground game. So what's the passing game going to do? It's just like Pittsburgh. So, for me, this team, I think they had some good success on the offensive side of the ball when it came to Deshaun Watson and passing and finding his targets. But when it came to running the football, not good. When it came to defense, really bad. Like I said, that bright spot on the defense is J.J. Watt having a good year like he always does. And then Zach Cunningham leading the league in tackles with 164. So hats off to him. Great season. But other than that, there's nothing much to say. If I'm a Texans fan, this is a complete loss of a season for me. I mean, they made the playoffs last year, right? And I think they played Buffalo, and they actually made it to the second round where they almost beat Kansas City, and then they blew that lead. So you're going from the playoffs and almost going to the AFC Conference Championship game to literally being in top, like a bottom team in the AFC. It's a complete loss of a season for me. Bill O'Brien ruined this team, and now you don't even have a draft pick in the first round to compensate for it, and you lost DeAndre Hopkins. This is
And
just
I think that just shows you that example that you just said right there with this team going all the way to the playoffs. I think you said they won one playoff game, right? Last
yeah,
season.
they beat Buffalo, I think.
Beat Buffalo, which obviously that Buffalo team not as good as they are this season, clearly. But that just shows you how important DeAndre Hopkins is. I mean, the Texans with DeAndre, playoffs, chance at the Super Bowl. The Texans without, 4-12 team, completely lost. And they didn't have a first round pick this year, and they don't have another one for the 2021 draft. So this team really doesn't have too much to look forward to. And I don't want to cut you off there. Do you have any other points that you want to make, or should I take over here?
No, you can take over. Houston. Just that if I'm a Houston fan, this is just a loss of a season for me.
Yeah, and I'd agree, but some sympathy, I guess, if this even counts. 10 of their 12 losses came to playoff teams. The only two teams that they lost to that weren't playoff teams was 37-31 at home against the Bengals. You're losing the Bengals. Enough said there. You have a guy like Deshaun Watson on your side, and he's losing in a shootout game. And then they lost to the Vikings 31-23. So a couple of close losses there that could have gone either way. And a bunch of these other losses could have gone either way. But I just think, very much like Jacksonville, this defense is not able to hang with the bigger teams. And, you could say, oh, yeah, well, all of our losses pretty much came to playoff teams. Well, look, that doesn't, say anything. If you look at next year, if you're going to lose to them this year, and then their playoff teams, how are you going to beat them next year? So I really don't think that this team has much to look forward to next year unless they just get an absolute, late round gem in the draft or somebody to help out Deshaun Watson, which I will say on the receiving end of the ball, I really like this team as far as, Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks go. I think they're two excellent receivers. If you look here, Will Fuller only played 11 games. We all know he got suspended for those last couple of games there. Stupid play out of him. It is what it is, but he did have 53 receptions. That's the most in his career. 879 yards. That easily the most in his career. And he also had 8 touchdowns. That is a career high as well. And I mean, who knows? I think he easily would have had over 1,000 yards, probably would have had 10 touchdowns, and probably at least 60 receptions if he had played the final 5 games for this Houston Texans team. And I know you have the Colts and the Titans, who great teams. We'll get to them next. So I don't think this team would have made the playoffs even if they finished 5-0 in the last 5 games, just because of that horrific start to the year. Didn't win until they played Jacksonville, and Jacksonville, they beat them twice. I mean, just a charity win, for them both times. But like you said, I don't think there's too much to talk about from this Texans team other than, this team has a lot of guys that they have a lot of talent, especially on that offensive side of the ball. And I think that they did a good job on putting up points. But I'd like to see, David Johnson get more involved. I mean, obviously, he is not what he was in his first couple of seasons with the Cardinals, and I don't think he will ever be what he was. But, you bring in guys like Randall Cobb into this offense. I mean, just the veteran presence, like you said, Laramie Tunsil. So they're trying to bring in older guys to compensate with, Deshaun Watson, who he's going to be turning into a veteran player probably, next year, maybe a couple more years. He has the weapons, but I don't think, this team is complete at all. I think this is a perfect example of a team like with a bunch of pieces that just don't fit together. And I know that they just dealt, DeAndre Hopkins, but I think that the only way this team, can change on defense is if they get a guy like, Stephon Gilmore. I mean, the Patriots have been talking about dealing him. I don't know what they have for picks. I know they don't have any recent first round picks. We know why. DeAndre Hopkins can tell you why. But yeah, this team, I mean, they better hope that they just get a gem in the draft or something, help out Deshaun Watson, or soon this guy's going to be out the door. But I will say, he did have a great season this year, and I'm going to pick him as my MVP. He had 33 touchdowns. That's the most in his career. His second closest was 26. He had him in 2018, 2019. He only had 7 interceptions. That's the lowest of his career. So Deshaun Watson, I mean, get this man some help because he has the skill. And, if Deshaun Watson was in Jacksonville, I think Jacksonville would be a better team than this Houston Texans team. So Gopal, that's going to be my MVP. Deshaun Watson, who is yours for this team?
Yep, I'm going to agree with you. I know we agree a lot, but I think it's pretty easy to tell. It's either between him and JJ Watt, but that defense was so suspect that I can't even give a defensive player an MVP award. It's Deshaun Watson. Like you said, I think he went on a 12-game streak or something without an interception. So a guy that can throw the ball and throw cannons, I mean, and you're not throwing interceptions. You historically look at a lot of these strong arm quarterbacks like Brett Favre. He led the league in interceptions a couple times because of his arm. Eli Manning, I think, a couple times, but like this guy, he had a great season. He was way more accurate. You can tell the talent that he has. Like you said, get this man some help. Another stat: Texans were fourth in the league when it came to passing yards a game, so 283.6 passing yards a game. So there's an upside and a good positive stat if you're a Texans fan. That passing game is going good. Deshaun Watson, he's throwing the football. He's throwing it accurately and effectively, and he's hitting his receivers right on the money. Now, let me just tell you this. We got news this morning that Deshaun Watson might have had some conversations with some teammates about requesting trades. Now, we can't confirm this is true, but ESPN put this out. So I'm not sure. They might be dealing him. I mean, we'll have to see what happens. I mean, you got to be frustrated, but as a young quarterback, I can't see Houston, um, you know, giving up their franchise quarterback. I think, you're going to get a new head coach. You're going to get, you just hired the Patriots personnel, Nick Casario as your GM. So I think, you got some positive things coming in the offseason. In my opinion, the best head coach option, I'll just weigh in on it right now. I think that Eric Bieniemy, the Kansas City Chiefs offensive coordinator, should easily get this head coaching job. He should sign with Houston because what he did with Patrick Mahomes, I think he can definitely do some damage with Deshaun Watson and what he has in that offense. Get a running game, and this offense can be lethal. So I think that, in my opinion, Eric Bieniemy should be signing with Houston. Houston should easily pursue him as much as they can. And then in the draft, you got to just focus on the run
The
game
defense,
or
100%.
mainly the defense. So
I think they should give David Johnson another try, though. I think this guy, you know, he is getting older, and injuries have set him back. He'll be able to tell you that. But I mean, I believe in this guy. If they can really maybe make a couple of upgrades on that offensive line, I mean, I think that David Johnson, he can get a second chance here, and he can, make a couple of good seasons out for this Texans team. And I mean, like we already went over with the receivers, I mean, just a really strong receiving core if they decide to not do drugs and stay on the field. So I just wanted to weigh in there on that.
yep. So my MVP is also Deshaun Watson, and that's a loss of a season for me if you're a Houston fan.
Yeah, okay. So with that, let's head over to the next AFC South team. Once again, we've got another tie within the division. The Titans and the Colts, both 11-5. We're going to talk about Indianapolis here, and a lot of things to talk about, in my opinion, on this team. And let's just start with that brand new quarterback. I mean, Philip Rivers. Philip Rivers played his whole career with San Diego, LA Chargers now. Herbert takes over for them. We'll talk about that in next episode. First year in Indianapolis, regardless of what happens this weekend in the wild card round, I mean, I'd say a great season for Philip. I'll let you start here, Copel, but just wanted to say, I think this Colts team has done a really good job turning around that team and that offense. So what's your perspective on this Indianapolis team?
Yeah, so good point there. They bring in Philip Rivers. I think I love the head coach Frank Reich. I think he does a good job stepping in a couple of years ago as the head coach. But he brings in Philip Rivers. I think what this means is they weren't gonna go with Jacoby Brissett. If you've watched Indianapolis games this year, they bring him in certain situations like 4th and 1 because he can run it more. They bring him in certain situations. So I like that. Jacoby Brissett also brings in some leadership on this team. So, I mean, that's another good thing. But having a veteran presence like Philip Rivers, who is on the brink of a Hall of Fame career, people are talking about will he make the Hall of Fame or not. Let's see what he does this year. But, he's a guy that he can throw. He used to be able to throw the football a lot. I don't think he can throw it as much anymore, but that's all because of age. So no disrespect to him. But I like the move that Indianapolis made to bring in this guy. Because you look at what the offense has, I think this is a great offensive line, by the way. And the reason for that, I mean, you need a good offensive line when you have some running backs. Marlon Mack, we talked about, he was out with an injury, but you bring in Jonathan Taylor, the rookie running back, and you have Naeem Hines, who's a really good receiving back. So you have those featured backs that you can use. Let me just tell you this. Jonathan Taylor, I'll give you this right now. He was third in the league in rushing this year as a rookie, and he had 1,169 rushing yards this season. So a great rookie campaign for him as a rookie. I mean, coming in this Colts team, helping them go to the playoffs, you could tell how much of an increased role he got as the season went on, kind of like J.K. Dobbins in Baltimore, but a really good, fantastic running back that's going to be a centerpiece for this Indianapolis team for a long time. Okay, now we go to the receiving core. T.Y. Hilton, he had a kind of bad start to the season, but as a veteran presence when they need it most to punch their ticket to the playoffs, what does he do? He steps up his game. He gets way more receiving yards, way more receptions. Phillip Rivers starts finding him more in the passing game, and he puts up stats and he helps his team make it. Now, moving on to the other side of the receiving tandem. Michael Pittman Jr., the rookie, he comes in, he makes some big time plays. This guy, if you're an Indianapolis fan, you're going to love him. Him and Jonathan Taylor are going to be great players that grow in the system. You're going to see a lot of them next year and the next couple of years. And Zach Pascal, a guy that no one really wants to talk about, he comes in at the end of the season and he starts making big time plays at the end of the year for this team. So you got to love that for Zach Pascal. I think that you got something there. You got a lot of upside in Pascal. So good stuff there from the receiving part. And I think this offensive line has done a really good job to help this running game out. Now we go to the defensive side of the ball. And I think that this team is definitely a strong defensive team because you look at the turnover differential, and I have it right here in front of me. They were second in the league at turnover differential at plus 10. So their defense is getting turnovers. You know what I mean? And they're giving their offense the ball. So, I mean, that's what you want to do. You want to keep the opposing team's quarterback off the field, and they do that. They hand Phillip Rivers the ball, basically. So they bring in guys like, oh my God, I forget. I think who's the cornerback they got from Minnesota, Xavier Rhodes. They pick him up. They have Darius Leonard at the linebacking spot. They have a lot of guys on defense that like to make plays, and their defense is really strong. They force fumbles, they get pick sixes, they get points off the defense. If you have their defense in fantasy, then you must be happy. So this defense is another one of those defenses. Like I said, you need a good defense to win in the playoffs. This team has a shot to win playoff games because of their defense. So as good as their offense was, I'd like to say their defense played even better. And you get the rookie kicker Blankenship out of Georgia, I believe, and he made some good kicks, and he was one of the most efficient kickers in the league. So we haven't talked about kickers at all really in this, but I think he's a spot you got to talk about because Phillip Rivers guy, you don't want to go 4th and 5 at like the 35-yard line. I mean, you got a guy that can kick the football really well. So that's another good thing that you have. You need a good field goal kicker. Vinatieri's too old. You bring in this guy. Blankenship makes a case, and yeah, so I'm trying to see if there's anything else I have about the Colts because I told you about that point differential. I told you about Jonathan Taylor. But this Colts team all around, they had a pretty good run game. They had a pretty good passing game. Their defense was pretty good. So they are a good, solid team. That's what I would say. If I'm a Colts fan, I'd count this season as a win. You know what I mean? You didn't make the playoffs last year. And I believe, you didn't make the playoffs last year. You're bringing a veteran like Phillip Rivers to give you maybe like a spark to see if you can make one last push because who knows, he might retire after this year. We've heard reports. So they bring him in. They get the most out of him. Now they're in a tight AFC playoff race. They sneak in. They get the seventh playoff spot. So they're going up against Buffalo. We already talked about that, but overall, I think it's a great season. If you're a Colts fan, you got to count it as a win, and I like to see what they do in the playoffs.
I mean, I think that this team has a tough matchup. They're playing Buffalo this weekend, correct?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So this team, obviously, a really tough matchup. We already talked about that in our first video, so go check that out. We're gonna have another video, a whole playoff bracket coming out later this week before the playoffs start. I don't know if you said this already, but Jonathan Taylor, 11 touchdowns this season. I know you capped on the yards. Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, Josh Jacobs, and Nick Chubb, and Alvin Kamara, the only ones that had more rushing touchdowns on the ground this season. And Jonathan Taylor, he's a rookie. None of those guys are rookies. So excellent season out of him. And this is a team that Jonathan Taylor, I mean, I'll say he got a little lucky with Marlon Mack. Obviously, you don't want to say that about a teammate, but this guy coming out of Wisconsin, I believe, just an excellent explosive year, like you said, racking up over 1,000 rushing yards. And the Colts actually traded up to select this guy in the draft. So that's how bad they wanted him. And I'll tell you, a great pick out of them. Second round, they got him at number 41. But this is, he had to fight for his job. I mean, this is a team with a lot of guys in the backfield, and they all can run. All these guys, I think, are capable of being a starting running back. If you just look at teams like Pittsburgh, New England, even that Jacksonville team, I mean, these guys all need, running backs that they can rely on. And the Colts, well, they have a list of them. So I think, a definite great season on him. And I just want to take a moment right here. Phillip Rivers hasn't had the best career. I wouldn't put him in the elite, but I'd put him in the respect category. He's been in the league since 04, and 04 and 05, he, 2 games played. So that was his rookie season, and the year after that. If you look at that, 06, he became the starter for the San Diego Chargers. 2020, he became the starter for the Indianapolis Colts. 2006 to 2020, he started in every single game in the NFL for his team, 16 games each year. So that's just a tremendous stat, and you love to see that. He's been healthy throughout his career. So that's just amazing for him. And also, not a great stat here, but rushing this season, 18 attempts, negative 18 yards. So that is the lowest of his career. So congratulations on that stat. I'm sure he's not too worried about that when he's got a guy like Jonathan Taylor, like we just talked about. This Indianapolis Colts defense, like you said, has been absolutely dominant. I would say probably top 3 this season. Darius Leonard, Anthony Walker, Kenny Moore. You talked about how they brought over Rhodes. Just a stacked team on the defensive side of the ball. And I really think that they're going to put on a show in this playoffs. And whether they get first round or they keep on going, this is going to be, this defense is, I think, going to be the reason why they make it however they do. This isn't a team that gives up a lot of points. And their offense will score points. I mean, they'll blow you out. Just ask the Jets, 36-7, 44-27. That was a game against the Raiders in Vegas, which was close. And then Colts defense made some plays, and the offense, they cashed in. Tough loss suffered in Pittsburgh. Horrible second half in that game, and a game that the Steelers really just looked horrific, like we talked about already in that first half. So they get unlucky there. We'll see if they have another battle with them. But other than that, I think, the draft picks have been great. We talked about Blankenship, kicker, such an underrated position in the NFL. So, yeah, I mean, other than that, that's all for me on the Colts. I think that this year's MVP for me is going to be Jonathan Taylor. Easy money. Running back, such a huge position. And when you have, a guy like Jonathan Taylor who's already making plays, scoring touchdowns in his rookie season, I mean, that's huge for the Colts. And I easily see this team back in the same position, if not better, next season, especially if they're able to bring some of those guys back on defense. Maybe get some pickups on the defensive end in free agency just to, stack that team even more on the defensive end. But yeah, Jonathan Taylor is my MVP this season for them. They've got the Bills on Saturday at 1:05 to kick off the playoffs and the wild card weekend. So Copel, who do you got for your MVP of this team?
Yeah, so good points, great points. Like we covered, I'm going to agree with you. I think Jonathan Taylor, you got to just give the MVP to him because he's had some spectacular rushing performances all year and he stayed so consistent in a guy that you think maybe he wouldn't even get as much of a chance if Marlon Mack didn't get hurt. So I think just how consistent he was, he's a reason that they really made this playoff push. So I think, MVP is the most valuable player. And I think this year, without Jonathan Taylor, would this team be in the playoffs? We don't know. So, but let's not forget about Nyheim Hines, a great receiving back. He made some great plays. So overall, I think this team is really good. If you're a Colts fan, you've got to be happy with it. And I think you got a great head coach in Frank Reich and what he's been doing with the team. So it'll be interesting to see what happens to Phillip Rivers after the season and how far they go in the playoffs. But Like I said, MVP for me is Jonathan Taylor, and it's a win for me if I'm a Colts fan.
Okay, so on that note, we have one more team in this AFC South division. King Henry and the Tennessee Titans, they finished 11-5, just a smidge over the Colts, just because they take that season series. So they do have the higher seed in the postseason. They're taking on the Baltimore Ravens, as we already talked about. So, Copel, what do you got for this team? How was their season? 5-3 at home, 6-2 on the road.
Yeah, so after last year, we saw the damage that Tennessee could do to really good super teams. So got to give head coach Mike Vrabel a lot of credit here. You know, he played in New England as a player. He becomes a coach. I think he loves what he does, and I think that, and I love as a fan what he does. So Mike Vrabel, credit to you. Hats off to you. You've kept this team. You improved from last year because you were 9-7. Getting into the playoffs, you just sneak in and you beat New England, and then you beat Baltimore, and then you almost beat Kansas City. So, I mean, you play all the tough teams and you actually win. So, good stuff. And then he comes back and has a better regular season record this year. So, you give Ryan Tannehill, who people said this guy's a bust. He got drafted in the first round a while ago. He did nothing in Miami. And Mike Vrabel says, hold on. There's potential in this guy. And he turns him around and makes him a really, really good player. That being said, Ryan Tannehill, great player. I think you look at him, he puts up great numbers. He's become a really good quarterback. He can run it himself. He can scramble out of the pocket. He can make deep throws. He can make check down throws. He's an accurate quarterback. I like Ryan Tannehill. You go to the receiving tandem. Okay, A.J. Brown is a beast. I mean, he really, if he wasn't injured as much this year, he would have had insane stats, in my opinion. And you can just see the big time plays that he can make. I think A.J. Brown is going to be a fantastic receiver in these playoffs. He's going to be a big reason they move forward if they do. And if he can stay healthy, he's going to be an absolute beast receiver for this team. Corey Davis, you know, people looked at him before and was like, he's an elite. But I think A.J. Brown stepped up to that role. He's the elite receiver. I think Corey Davis is a really, really good receiver right behind him. So another target to give Ryan Tannehill. You had tight ends like Jonnu Smith come out and be really effective throughout the year. So I think when you have that good receiving tight end and you have tight ends that can block on the line of scrimmage, it's really helpful for your run game, which I'll get to in a minute. So good stuff from Mike Vrabel in this offense. And let me just tell you, we'll get to him right now. The King, Derrick Henry, led the league in rushing this season with 2,027 rushing yards. So he hits the 2,000 mark in one season, up there with historic greats around the NFL and the history of the game. So hats off to him. And I'll tell you, I always talk about running back depth. This is the one team that I believe doesn't even need it because of how much Derrick Henry, how effective he runs the football. I bet you guys couldn't even name the running back behind Derrick Henry. I mean, they played him in the end of a couple of games when they knew they were going to win. But Derrick Henry is a beast. He just runs all over teams.
By the way.
Yeah, McDaniels.
Gotta give him some respect.
Gotta give him respect. But my point was, I bet you guys couldn't even tell him because you see Derrick Henry on the field all the time. And the only reason this offense is even close to where it is because of him. This team last year, and you saw it this year, I mean, this guy just runs the ball like crazy. And you start feeding him the ball. He's so dominant. You can just feed it to him whenever you want. But then teams, like I said, run game opens up passing game. Once you start committing to the run, this is when Ryan Tannehill becomes elite. And he opens up that play action, which he is great off of play action. And he makes his throw. Corey Davis, Jonnu Smith, whoever you need to do. I mean, this team is really good on the offensive side of the ball. They put up a lot of points. I'll just tell you this. Offensively, this team was tied in second in the entire league for offensive yards per game, which was 396.4. They were tied with Buffalo. So we look at that. Buffalo's a powerhouse. You're averaging 396.4 yards on offense throughout every game. You're demolishing teams offensively, and that all starts from King Henry, Derrick Henry, the run. I'll give you some more stats for the Titans here. Second in the league in rushing yards per game. And thanks to Derrick Henry, I mean, this team averaged 168.1 rushing yards per game. You got to give credit where credit's due. That all strengths from Derrick Henry. It's no doubt in my mind that let's go to the defense side of the ball for a minute. And this is a place where Tennessee, believe it or not, has kind of struggled throughout the year. Their defense actually is not really that good. You look at the stats, their best stat is the turnover differential. They led the league in turnover differential with plus 11. So their defense got 11 turnovers, more turnovers than their offense turned the ball over. So their defense is getting picks, getting fumbles. They're scoring some points, but their defense really hasn't been anything special or great outside of that. I mean, you look at this team defensively, and I'll just give you some more stats here. So this team was bottom 3 in the league in defensive yards per game. So they were giving up 398.3 yards per game. Now, when you're scoring when you're putting up 396.4 yards per game on the offensive side of the ball, and your defense is giving up 398.3 yards per game on the defensive side of the ball, and that offense, I mean, your offense can't just carry your team the whole way through. So, the Titans defense, they got to work on that. They're giving up too many yards per game to me. When you have an offense that's being electric as it is and a powerhouse, I mean, I think this offense you could even say is a powerhouse because of the way they play. They put up lots of points per game. And if your defense is just not performing even decent enough to give Ryan Tannehill the ball, I mean, this team's going to get worn out offensively and defensively because Tannehill can throw the ball and Derrick Henry can run the ball as much as they want. But if their defense isn't doing their job and they're just letting other teams score, every game almost is like a shootout to me that I've seen from Tennessee. So their defense needs a lot of work. Another stat, I'll just give it to you. They were also bottom 3 in the AFC in sacks. They only had 19 sacks as a team this year. So we talked about Cincinnati having 17, the Jaguars having 18. Tennessee only had 19. So once again, a spot that needs work on the defense. You need to get pressure on the quarterback in order to be a good defense, and they didn't do that. That could be a yards per game. So we're getting turnover defense. His defense was not good at all. So if you're Mike Vrabel going into the postseason, you got to say, how can we fix this defense? This offense is really good. It's a run-heavy offense with play action, passes deep down the field when teams commit too much to King Henry. I think it's a great system on offense. I think the defense needs some work. But overall, from a Titans fan, this has to be a win season for me because you go 9-7 and just sneak into the playoffs. Now you win your division at 11-5, and you have a chance to even, who knows, go further in the playoffs than last year. So that's what I have to say about Tennessee.
Absolutely. I think you made some great points there. Got to go back to the man, Derrick Henry, O.J. Simpson, Eric Dickerson, Barry Sanders, Terrell Davis, Jamal Lewis, Chris Johnson, Adrian Peterson. All those guys have had over 2,000-yard seasons. Add Derrick Henry to that list. 2,027 rush yards for him. So just unbelievable. He's up on that list with, if you know anything about football,
all-time greats.
Guys, yeah, all-time greats. I mean, even though they were before our time, I mean, just, these guys all going to be Hall of Famers if they aren't already, most likely. So, just unbelievable out of him. Like I already said, 17 touchdowns, led the league this season in rushing touchdowns. Now moving on to the wide receivers. My take on them, A.J. Brown, 11 touchdowns. He had an excellent season, over 1,000 yards for the second year in a row. And this was his second season. He had 70 receptions last year, only had 52. And he also played in 2 less games. So just clearly he's getting better. You love to see that. Derrick Henry's getting better. A.J. Brown's getting better. They're getting guys involved like Corey Davis, too, on that offensive side of the ball. So, this offense has really been excellent for the Titans. And I think, this is a team that is just, there's proof that they're getting better. I mean, Corey Davis was a guy that they drafted, didn't really make an impact. And then this season, he just broke out, had a huge season. Ryan Tannehill, I mean, this guy deserves all the credit. For 6 seasons, he's been with Tennessee for 2, and he's already had, 2 years that are arguably his best years. I mean, 33 touchdowns this season. That's tied with who we just talked about, Deshaun Watson. This is a 32-year-old, and he isn't Tom Brady and he isn't Aaron Rodgers. 32 touchdowns, that's pretty damn impressive, especially when you're handing the ball to Derrick Henry at least 20 times a game. So that's chewing up plenty of clock. Only 7 picks. Last year, he only had 6, but he throws 11 more touchdowns this year. And that's, again, living proof of how he's gotten better. And these Tennessee Titans receivers have gotten better. Defensive side of the ball, I think this defense is, getting a little older. They drafted Landry. They have a lot of young cornerbacks that are now, just getting to learn to play with each other, making plays on the field. And they're really looking good. I mean, 11-5 on the year, like you said, better than last year. So they're progressing. Not the hardest schedule this season, but they did, have to play the Steelers and the Bears and the Colts, obviously, twice, and the Packers, who that was, Lambeau Field, the snow late in the season. I mean, a blowout there. A loss to the Browns in a shootout game. So, this is a team that has played some good teams, and they know what it's like to, lose in a battle. And I think the offensive part of this team is the best part. As much as I think that defense is still getting better as well, I think the offense has really carried this team. A lot of high scoring games. I mean, they've put up 30 points several times, pretty much over 20 every single game this season. So, this team, and they're playing the Ravens, a team that they knocked around last season. I think it's going to be closer in the this playoff game than last year, but I do think that this team does have the upper hand, just because it's 2 offensive teams. And like you said, I think this team, we can put the title powerhouse in front of them. They're a really strong team in the air and on the ground. You just, you got to prepare for all of it. You don't know how they're going to play. They could be handing it off to Derrick Henry every other play, or Ryan Tannehill could be looking for A.J. Brown, 11 receptions in the game. You never know what's going to happen. I think this defense is good enough to keep them in the game. I mean, this is a team that blew out the Bills 42-16. Now, it was week 5, but, Bills went 13-3. So that means that they were pretty much sharp all season. This is a team that, and the Bills definitely a powerhouse on offense. We already, made that clear, but this is a team that really can hang with the big dogs. And this is, if they get past the Ravens, I mean, which that's our prediction, but I think that there's a chance that they could beat anyone in these playoffs. You never know. It is a new season, but my MVP this year, it's got to be Derrick Henry. I mean, 2,000 yards. I just rambled off the names. That, like, 1,000-yard seasons are great, and that's, an excellent achievement. But that's a thing now. If you're a running back and you're playing pretty much at least 13 games and you're a decent running back, a good running back. I mean, James Robinson, he's on a 1-15 team and he got over 1,000 yards. But Derrick Henry, 2,000 yards, and yes, he does get the ball a ton and blah, blah, blah. But, just unbelievable what he has done, for this team. And he's got the touchdowns to prove it too. So, yeah, he is easily my MVP. And Copel, if you want to say your MVP before we end this podcast.
Yep. So you said everything that I was going to say. So this is a complete and obvious clear-cut MVP. It's Derrick Henry. He is in the top 3 to 4 MVP in the league for me this season with what he has done. 2,027 rushing yards on the ground. I mean, I'll give you a crazy stat that I heard on TV on I forget. I think it was on the game this past week against Houston. He is the first running back in NFL history, I believe, that ran for 2,000 yards that did not have a Pro Bowl lineman. So none of that lineman is like Pro Bowl caliber. They're good. I mean, they get the job done. But you look at like Taylor Lewan, he's really good, but he got hurt earlier in the year, so he wasn't even there for the whole time. So an amazing stat there. We take a look at most valuable player. Okay, most valuable player. Would this team even be close to where they are without Derrick Henry? Absolutely not. He's the reason this offense is so lethal. So it's an easy pick for me. It's got to be Derrick Henry at MVP for this team, and I'm excited to see what they can do in the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is an exciting year for the playoffs. I mean, part of the reason why we wanted to start the podcast, as you guys know, or you should know by now, our first video was on Wild Card Weekend. I mean, I think, we saw an opportunity and we grabbed it. I mean, this is just going to be a very exciting playoffs. none of these matchups besides maybe Tampa Bay and Washington, games really you just have no idea. But another point I want to add out here, just going back to the Colts for a second, 6 touchdowns on defense. So, I mean, that's just a ridiculous stat. I believe they lead the league. I'm not 100% sure. Correct me if I'm wrong, but 6 touchdowns on defense. But that's going to do it for the AFC South here. So obviously, top 2 teams, pretty good season, a lot to look forward to. The bottom 2 definitely need some work. I think the Jaguars, though, I think they might be in a better position than the Texans for next year, just having that number 1 overall pick. I really like the receiving core for all teams in this division. But, it's going to be interesting. I think this division, there could be some things moved around for next year, and this might not be, 1 through 4. It might not be the same as next year. So, thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Episode 4 of the Underdog podcast in the books. Hope you guys enjoy the new name, and stay tuned for more. Peace out.